I'm sure has to be Chairman Conrad's frustration to not have a budget. Couldn't be a more important topic for us to be talking about today, or for the American people to be asking the question, why not? Why are you just refusing to do your job? And I know nobody in this chamber knows as much about the budget, in my opinion, as you do. And your frustration of where this doesn't allow us to go to do the right things is as great as anybody's, maybe greater than everybody's. But I think all of us know we should be doing the right thing here, which is to obey the law, create a budget, and have a budget that gets us to the place that we know we need to get to, where our economy, once again, is right-sized to our government, or more importantly, our government's right-sized to our economy.
Briefly, before I go to Senator Thune and get him engaged in this, based on your experience in the budgetary process, about 60% of federal spending is mandatory entitlement spending and mandatory entitlement spending. Do you think that we can develop a long-term plan for the future that fails to address that large portion that's growing faster than the other part of the budget?
No, we can't. And, you know, last year, for the first time ever, all of the money that came in was less than the money that went out automatically to these programs, where if you meet the definition for the program, you get the money. And it is at 60% now, and it hasn't been that many years ago. It was at 50%. And it wasn't that many years before that. It was at 40%. And it was, you know, and so we have got to deal with these issues because they lead us to an inevitable place. Do we want to be Europe today just a few years from now? Surely not. Surely the answer is no, and we can't avoid that unless we have a plan. Now, it's easy to talk about how bad the other plan is, but what we all ought to be doing is coming up with a plan that gets us to where we all know we need to be.
Thank you. Senator Thune, thank you for your leadership and active participation in this debate. And what's on your mind this morning as we will be heading to votes on 4 different budgets?
Well, I would say to my colleague from Alabama, who's the ranking member on the Budget Committee, that I got on the Budget Committee in this session of Congress and have been on it now for 2 years, and we haven't written a budget either year. So it sort of begs the question about whether or not the committee has any relevance around here anymore. But, you know, to the point about spending and debt, you know, we get down here, we talk about it. I think it's been really interesting. The former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, who up until several months ago held that position, would come in front of Congress, in front of congressional committees, and say that the greatest threat to America's national security is our national debt. Now, you know, there are a lot of external threats the United States faces, and the world continues to be a dangerous place, and al-Qaeda and Iranian nuclear capability and China and North Korea, you can go right down the list. But for the top-ranking military official in this country to come before Congress and say that the greatest threat to America's national security is our national debt speaks volumes about what our priority ought to be. And to think that we here in the United States Senate now for over 1,100 days have not passed a budget is pretty stunning in light of that reality. And also to say that somehow because the Budget Control Act last summer passed that we don't need a budget really misses the point. The reason we had the Budget Control Act is because we didn't pass a budget. The Budget Control Act is what you get when you don't pass a budget. You end up at the 11th hour having to come at the last minute to put something together to deal with the issue of the debt limit, which was what we were dealing with at that time. And it did put some caps on spending, but it doesn't do anything to deal with the long-term structural challenges facing this country, which is what a budget is designed to do. And, you know, the President submitted a budget this year which would suggest that he thought that we ought to be working on a budget. The chairman of the Budget Committee, as my colleagues have mentioned, even called a Budget Committee markup, where we went there, said bring amendments. And we went and we brought amendments and we gave opening statements and we gavelled it out and said we're not going to do it. And so here we are again on the floor of the United States Senate without a budget, having to vote on other budgets presented by some of our colleagues, the House of Representatives, which passed a budget this year earlier, and the President's budget. And to be fair, the President at least submitted a budget. It was a terrible budget if you're looking at the issues of spending and debt. In fact, I think the reason that it got voted down 414 to nothing in the House of Representatives is because it added $11 trillion to the debt. It takes our total debt at the end of the 10-year period to $26 trillion and spends $47 trillion over the next 10 years, raises taxes by $2 trillion on a very fragile economy. There was a really bad attempt, but at least it was an attempt. It was an attempt that yielded 0 votes in the House of Representatives, and it'll be interesting to see if on the floor of the United States Senate today there are any Democrats who will vote for their president's budget proposal. But the point that the senator from Alabama and the senator from Missouri make is a good one, and that's just simply this. We have a responsibility under the law to spell out what we would do to get this country on a more sustainable fiscal path. That's something that's in the budget laws that the senator from Alabama pointed out. And yet here we go on year after year after year now, 3 years in a row, over 1,100 days, without the Senate doing its job and passing a budget. And that's significant for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is now this is the fourth year in a row where we're going to have a $1 trillion deficit. I mean, under this administration, they had the highest deficit, the second highest deficit, the third highest deficit, and the fourth highest deficit in history. 4 years now, consecutive years of $1 trillion deficits. But we're concerned about the economy. We need the economy to get growing again, to expand, to create jobs. That helps address all these things. And what's interesting about it, and I know both my colleagues here on the floor are well aware of this, but there's a lot of research that's been done with regard to developed countries who start carrying these high debt loads. And all the analysis suggests that when you get a debt to GDP ratio of more than 90%, it costs you about a point to a point and a half of economic growth every single year. Well, in our country, a percentage point of economic growth means 1 million jobs. So our debt to GDP, which is now over 100%, means that it is draining our economy of economic growth and therefore lots of jobs. The Congressional Budget Office said about the President's budget that if his budget were to be enacted, it could cost us up to 2.2% of economic growth over the course of the next 10 years, which would amount to 2.2 million jobs. So we know the President's effort was not serious. He did at least put something out there. But we need a serious discussion here in the United States Senate about a budget that will put us on a pathway not only to get spending and debt under control, but to allow the economy to grow and expand and get Americans back to work. That's what's at stake here. That's really why we believe we ought to have a budget. That's why we're going to have an exercise today where at least we get a chance to vote on some budgets as advanced by some of our colleagues in the House of Representatives as well as here in the Senate and the President's budget. But the fact of the matter is that this is the 3rd year in a row when we haven't followed the law and gone through the process of getting a budget here on the floor of the United States Senate. And for our colleagues to suggest on the other side that it's not necessary simply because the Budget Control Act was passed last summer not only is inconsistent with the law, but it begs the point about why did the President submit a budget? Why did they call a Budget Committee markup in the first place? I mean, clearly somebody around here thinks that we ought to be doing our job, but we're not doing it. And so I would hope that as we debate this issue today, that at least we'll put in front of the American people the arguments that we think need to be made with regard to getting spending and debt under control, addressing the long-term, the mandatory side of the budget, as my colleague from Missouri, Senator Blunt, mentioned. That's where we know the money is. That's what nobody wants to deal with. We keep squeezing a little bit more out of the discretionary side of the budget. We have got to take on, if we're going to save Social Security and Medicare and reform these entitlement programs, that's what a budget process would do. It doesn't take 60 votes under the law. It takes 51. So to come down here and say that, the Republicans would just filibuster, again, is completely out of whack with what we know to be the facts around here in the law, and that is that it's 51 votes to pass a budget and a reconciliation bill that could possibly follow. So I appreciate my colleague from Alabama, his leadership as the ranking member on the Budget Committee, and I look forward today at least to the chance for us to at least talk about a budget and what we ought to be doing for the future of this country, since we really don't have a budget on the floor of the United States Senate.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, and I would just note the reason we're here today is because a budget was not produced. The parliamentarian of the Senate ruled that a budget has not been produced, and therefore, under the rules of Budget Act, budgets that have been filed can be brought to the floor. And that's how we were able to force the vote today. And Senator Thune, just briefly, I'll ask also in our leadership, Senator Blunt, isn't it a fact that what happened with the Budget Control Act is we'd spent so much money, we'd reached the spending limit of America, the debt ceiling, and we had to have a last-minute effort to reach an agreement, and the Republicans insisted that we had to reduce spending. And we got a reduction in spending from $47 trillion over the next 10 years to $45 trillion. And you would have thought that's going to bankrupt America. But we would spend $45 trillion instead of $47, and that's not a budget. It just was a limit on spending, and it was done because Republicans said, we're not going to raise the debt limit until you at least cut some spending. And that's all that could be accomplished, and we avoided a crisis, but it was a pretty tense time. Senator Blunt?
You know, I'd like to say on this, saying the Budget Control Act is a budget, as Senator Thune mentioned, if that was the budget, why did the President submit one? Nobody really believes that's a budget. The parliamentarian said it wasn't a budget. But what it is, it'd be like your family sitting down to decide what money you're going to have to spend this year, and you say, okay, we've got X number of dollars, let's just go out and spend it. That's no budget, particularly when you had to borrow 40% of the X number of dollars you said you had. You know, we're borrowing 40% of the money we're going to spend. The only number we have that we've agreed to is the maximum amount we'll spend, knowing we don't have anywhere near that number, and we haven't allocated that in any way. That's no budget. Everybody knows that. And everybody also knows that we're not, you can't get there unless you have a way to get there. Your family says, okay, we've done the budgeting for the year. We've just decided if we borrow almost as much money as we make and we spend that somewhere, that's our budget. We haven't decided where we're going to spend it, haven't decided how we're going to spend it, haven't even really decided a reasonable way that we're going to get it. But we just said, here's the number we're going to spend. Now, family, let's all go out and just start spending, and we'll meet here later this year and see how it worked out. It makes no sense at all, and everybody knows that. Interestingly, we don't hear much about this. It's surprising to me that every day there's not a story about why, for the first time ever, for 3 years straight now, the Senate has decided it just doesn't have to do the work that the law requires it to do as we dig this hole deeper and deeper and deeper. The longer we wait, the more difficult the solution is going to be. Every single day that passes, it's harder to solve this problem than it would have been the day before. And now we've gone 3 years without a budget, and apparently we're going to go through the rest of this process without a budget. By the time we get to the end of this year, we'll be approaching that 4th year without a budget. And it's not like this would just be a good idea. The law says we have to have one, and we should have one. And
Well, Senator Blunt, you've been in leadership in the House. You're in the leadership of the United States Senate. Be frank with us. What is it that would cause the majority party not to want to lead, not to want to lay out a plan for the future, and just attack anybody that does lay out a plan? Well, I mean, I know it's hard. We all know this is a tough thing, but don't you think a party that aspires to lead the United States Senate should, instead of hiding under the table, should stand up and say what they believe we should do over the next decade financially?
Well, I think the law even requires it. Now, I think the leader on the other side, the majority leader, has been pretty clear about this. It's just bad politics to have a budget. Bad politics to tell the American people officially what we're for. Bad politics for our members to have to go on record saying what they're for. The President submitted a budget. There are 54 members of the President's party here in the Senate. 51 of them could pass this budget, and it would be the Senate-passed budget. And then you'd go to the House and you'd say, okay, let's look at the House budget and the Senate budget and see if we could agree on a budget. But they've been pretty transparent. You got to give them some credit for not trying to be different than they really are. They've just said, hey, it'd be politically foolish for us to pass a budget, because then people would know what every one of 51 of our members were for, and they have to say what they're for. My guess is that nobody in the majority will say they're for anything today. Not for the President's budget, not for any budget we'll submit. So you go home and say, you know, I'm not for any of that. You can't accuse me of being for a bad plan, because I'm for no plan. And that's where we are.
Like, we need revenue, I use that word, but won't say who they want to tax explicitly, except a very few rich. The Buffett tax would produce about $4 billion a year when we've got a $1,200 billion deficit. I would just note that Senator Manchin, a former governor of West Virginia, said he'd be impeached if he, in today's Politico, if he failed to produce a budget as West Virginia's governor. He said, sure, I have a problem with failing to offer a budget. As a former governor, my responsibility was to put a budget forward and balance it. Well, I see my colleague is here. I think our time is up. Senator Thune, it might be a couple of minutes, and I'll yield to you.
Senator, we yield for a minute that I assume in Alabama and Missouri, I know that in South Dakota, our states pass budgets. It can be done. You can balance your budget. It would be nice if we had a requirement in the Constitution that would demand that, like many of our states do. Certainly there doesn't seem to be the political will here to do it absent that, but it can be done, and hard decisions have to be made. South Dakota went through it last year, made some hard choices. Our governor, our legislature, those are the types of hard decisions that are going to have to be made here, but it takes a certain amount of political will and the willingness to make hard decisions. And as the Senator from Alabama and the Senator from Missouri have both pointed out, there doesn't seem to be the willingness here to make those hard votes. As has already been pointed out, the leader has said on the other side that, you know, what point is there in doing a budget? And the President of the United States and his folks, when they were asked about whether or not the Senate ought to do a budget, said, well, we don't really have an opinion about that, which I think is really ironic coming from the leader of the free world about whether or not this country ought to have a budget to work with. But that being said, I think as our time winds down here, to argue, as our colleagues have, that we don't need one, that it misses the point of the law. The parliamentarian has ruled that the Budget Control Act was, in fact, not a budget. We need to do a budget here in the Senate, and more importantly, the American people expect it and the taxpayers deserve it. And that's why we ought to be having a debate on what we're going to vote for today, not what we're going to vote against. And it'll be interesting to see if any of our colleagues on the other side vote for any of the budget proposals that will be put forward today, including the President's. The President of the United States, his budget will be voted on, along with several other Republican budgets. I got a feeling we'll be for some things. I got a feeling that, as you said earlier, they're not going to be for anything.
I thank the Chair. Is the time up on this side?
The time has expired.
I thank the Chair. We yield the floor.
Madam President?
Senator from North Dakota.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that Chantel Boyens, a detail lead of the Budget Committee, be given floor privileges for the pendency of the debate on the budget resolutions and S-2516 Food and Drug Administration Safety and Innovation Act.
Without objection.
Madam President, I have 6 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders. I ask unanimous consent these requests be agreed to and that these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent the use of calculators be permitted on the floor today during consideration of the motions to proceed to budget resolutions.
Without objection.
Madam President, I want to go back to the point that my colleagues have made. It's fascinating to me. You didn't hear them talk for one moment about the substance of their proposals. Not a moment. Did you notice that? I wonder why that would be. I think I know. Because their proposals would take us right back to the failed policies that brought this country to the brink of economic collapse. That's what happened the last time they were in charge. They controlled both bodies from 2001 to 2006, the White House to 2008, so none of those policies they'd put in place when they controlled both chambers could be changed. And where were we at the end of 2008? Where were we? We were losing 800,000 jobs a month, and the economy was shrinking at a rate of 9%. And the proposals that they have, the substantive proposals they're making here today, take us right back to those same failed policies. So it's no wonder you don't hear them saying one word about the budget proposals we're going to be voting on, because they're the same failed policies that put this country in the ditch. Instead, what you hear them say is we on our side have no budget. Fascinating. Well, let me just put up again what we passed last year a law called the Budget Control Act. And let me again read from that law. It says, the allocations, aggregates, and levels, spending levels, in subsection shall apply in the Senate in the same manner as for a concurrent resolution on the budget for fiscal year 2012. In the next clause, it makes the exact same statement for 2013, that the Budget Control Act that was passed last year will serve in the same manner as a budget resolution. And earlier this year, pursuant to that law, I gave the appropriators, which I am required to do under the law, what they could spend. And here it is. I've got this chart being blown up. Agriculture, nutrition, and forestry, $13,397 million. Armed services, $146,698 million. Banking, housing, and urban affairs, $22,167 million. Commerce, science, and transportation, they get $15 billion and $16 million. Energy and natural resources, $5,276 million. Sounds kind of like a budget, doesn't it? Doesn't that sound kind of like a budget? Well, guess what? It is a budget. And it's in the Budget Control Act that we passed last year instead of a budget resolution. Now, again, anybody that's taken high school civics knows a budget law is stronger than any budget resolution. Why would that be the case? Because a budget resolution is purely a congressional document. Never goes to the president for his signature. A budget law, by definition, has to be signed by the president. So last year, instead of a budget resolution, we passed a budget law called the Budget Control Act. Pursuant to that law, I gave the appropriators earlier this year, before the deadline, their allocations. And I was just reading from them. Finance, $1,337,888. Foreign relations, $28,640 million. Homeland Security, $102,276 million. The Judiciary Committee, $18,545 million. Rules and Administration, $41 million. Sounds a lot like a budget, doesn't it? Because that's exactly what it provided. It provided the spending limits for this year and for next year. That's in the Budget Control Act that we passed in the United States Senate last year on a strong bipartisan vote, passed the House of Representatives, signed into law by the President of the United States. So when we hear over and over there's no budget, no spending limits for this year, it's just not so. There are spending limits for this year. There are spending limits for next year. They are included in the Budget Control Act, which is a law. It was passed. It was signed by the President. Madam President, it also, that Budget Control Act, limited spending for the next 10 years, put spending caps in place. Budget resolutions rarely have spending caps for more than 1 year. The Budget Control Act had 10 years of caps, saving $900 billion. That's the law. I see the senator from Michigan is on the floor, a very valued member of the Budget Committee. Welcome to this debate. We've been hearing a lot from the other side. Interestingly enough, I want to say to the senator, almost nothing about the substance of their proposals. I assume that's because they want to go back to the same failed policies that put this country in the ditch that we're still digging out of. All they want to talk about is not having a budget resolution. Not one word that instead of a budget resolution, we passed a budget law, as you well know, the Budget Control Act. I recognize the senator. How much time would the senator
5 minutes or so, 7 possibly.
No,
Yeah.
we'll allocate 10 minutes, and if you don't use it all,
Thank you.
I thank the senator.
Thank you.
Senator from
Madam President, first let me thank the chairman of the Budget Committee, who I have to say is going to be sorely missed. In fact, I'm not sure we're going to let him go at the end of the year. I think we're going to put up some doors, lock the doors in his office and not let him leave. He has been such an incredible, valued member of the Senate and a leader for our country on these issues. And it's absolutely true that what we're really debating is whether we go back to policies that put us in the huge deficit ditch that we find ourselves in, or whether we continue to go forward as a country. We need to keep going forward and going forward even more quickly, certainly, but in my state we are seeing us begin to move forward with manufacturing coming back, innovation, opportunities, and we need to continue to push for that. But let me stress as well what the chairman has said. We passed the Budget Control Act by 74 votes in the United States Senate. 74 votes, bipartisan vote, in August 2nd of 2011. It put in place the spending caps that the chairman talked about. It laid out something that, frankly, in my time, since being here, starting in 2001, has been done differently and, frankly, has a stronger basis for it, because instead of just having something passed by the House and the Senate, it actually was signed by the President. It's law. It has the face of law, the force of law, and is in a situation where it has even more impact than what we would normally do. So, yes, we didn't do the normal process. What we did was one better than the normal process, which is the Budget Control Act. And it did pass, and it did put in place the spending caps, and in fact set up, as we know, a Deficit Reduction Commission, a requirement on cuts that will take place in January. And it's also true that what we don't have is the long-term plan. And as the chairman has talked about over and over again, we've got to come together on a long-term deficit reduction plan. So we agree on that. And there are many people that have talked about that, worked on various proposals. The President has led negotiations. Members in this body have, and certainly the chairman of the committee has continued to lead those efforts. And we need to get that done. But in terms of what we have on a budget resolution that puts in place limits or caps, that has been done. Now, when we look at what is in front of us in the votes that we're going to be having today, it's very, very simple in terms of values, Madam President. The question is on your side of the middle class or on the side of millionaires in this country. You know, folks in my state, millionaires feel like, the middle class, I should say, feel like the system, you know, it's been pretty much rigged against them. And all they want is a fair shot. We've got families in Michigan struggling to make ends meet. They're struggling to send their kids to college. Over and over again, they look at what's going on here and scratch their heads. And why in the world would we continue to focus on things that help a privileged few, those who have had the most benefit in the last decade? Why do we continue to see policies like these budgets that in fact focus on more tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires and ask middle-class families to sacrifice more and more? They shake their heads and say, what's going on here? You guys just don't get it of what's happening to the majority of families. And what we're seeing once again is that rather than focusing on jobs and bringing the economy back on track, bringing jobs back to the United States, strengthening our ability to make things and grow things in this country, which has to happen if we're going to have a middle class and have an economy. What we see our colleagues on the other side of the aisle wanting to double student loan rates and eliminate Medicare. Eliminate Medicare as we know it in order to give another round of tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires. That makes absolutely no sense. Instead of spending our time passing jobs bills that we need to pass, by the way, including the Farm Bill, which employs 16 million people in this country, when we talk about rural communities and agriculture and food processing and all of our efforts on food policy across the country. Instead of doing that, they want to spend their time focusing on something that will give more tax breaks to millionaires and ask middle-class families one more time, just one more time, to sacrifice. Folks in my state are saying we've had enough of this. We've had enough of this. What we ought to be doing is our to-do list, stopping outsourcing and rewarding companies who bring jobs home, helping responsible homeowners refinance and take advantage of today's lower interest rates, cutting taxes for small business who are creating jobs and investing in their companies. We should be continuing critical investments in clean energy manufacturing for the future. And as I said, passing a farm bill for 16 million Americans whose jobs rely on agriculture and our rural economy. And we should be focusing on helping our veterans who are coming home from the war find good-paying jobs and thanking them for their service. So we've got a lot to do, a lot to do. Instead, we're in the same old failed debate that got us in the hole, got us to the situation where there was a crisis on Wall Street, got us to the point where we lost millions and millions of jobs in the past. Are we going to go back or are we going to go forward? That's really the question. Are we going to go backwards? Are we going to go forwards? So right now, what are the differences when we look at the four different Republican plans? They're very, very similar. Some different numbers, some accurate, some not accurate, but different numbers. But here's some basic three things that are the same. They all end Medicare as an insurance plan, increase costs by thousands of dollars for seniors in our country, put them back in a plan that's in 1964 or before, where seniors would have to try to find private insurance. And of course, since as we get older, we all spend more health care dollars, we all need more health care, so costs are higher, so it's tougher for people who are older to find affordable insurance. And they couldn't find it, which is why we created Medicare in 1965. Well, they would say, go back prior to 1965, end Medicare as we know it. Second thing is, allow student loan rates to double. All the plans would double the cost. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but in Michigan, where we are transforming the economy, going to advanced manufacturing, new technologies, we have folks going back to school in their 40s and 50s. We have young people going to college, and they're not asking for more expense. I mean, the average debt in Michigan is about $25,000 that a student has, and they're not asking to add to that anymore. And all four of these would do that, would double the student loan interest rates. And by the way, these are loans. People are taking out the money, they're responsible, and they are paying it back. But they're asking for help to be able to make sure that they can afford to be able to have those loans so that they can dream big dreams and go to college and be successful. And I thought that's what our country was all about. You know, when I was growing up in the little town of Clare, if my dad was sick in high school, when I was in high school, and if I hadn't had help with tuition and fee scholarship and loans, I wouldn't have been able to go to college. And the great thing about our country is that some red-headed, freckle-faced girl in Clare who folks didn't know, folks somewhere decided that, hey, maybe I ought to have a chance to go to college. And because of that, I've had tremendous opportunities in my life. We have a lot of young women, young men working hard every day who deserve the same opportunity. People who've lost their job who are going back to get new training who deserve the same opportunity. So all four of these plans end Medicare as an insurance plan, increase by thousands of dollars, cost to seniors, double student loan rates, and all of it to make sure that we give more tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires. I know at least one or more of these plans add $150,000, I believe, in average tax cut. That's more than the average person in Michigan makes in a year. The average person in America makes in a year. And so we're saying to seniors, we're saying to families and students, we want you to pay more so we can give another tax cut to the folks that have already gotten the majority of the benefits in the last 10 years economically. And let me just stress one more time before ending, because I think this goes to the values represented in these budgets. I mean, do we want to say that retirees, that older people in our country have the opportunity to live long lives? You know, Social Security and Medicare are great American success stories. They've literally brought a generation out of poverty to live in dignity. They brought a generation of people like my mom, who's almost 86, to a place where she's healthy, she can play with her grandkids because she had the opportunity to pay into a system called Medicare and be able to live longer. Those are good things. Those are good values in America, not bad values. Those are good values. And all four of these budgets, the Paul budget would end Medicare in 2014. The Lee budget would end it in 2017, the Ryan budget in 2023, and the Toomey budget in 2023. I cannot imagine that Americans want to go back to that system where seniors can't count on the ability to see a doctor, get their medicine, and have the dignity of a long and healthy life. Madam President, I would urge our colleagues to vote no on every single one of these approaches that go backwards and support our efforts to keep America going forward and to focus on those things that are going to make our economic recovery even faster. Yield the floor.
Senator from Alabama.
Madam President, we need to lay out a plan for the future of this country. I mean, that's what this is all about. And my colleague just said, just vote no on all of them and keep us going. Don't go back. What I hear that to be said, and no ambiguity about it, is let's just keep on the path we're on. This is good enough. Let's be happy. We're in Washington. Here's the letter, you know. We're in Washington. We're having fun. I caught a fish. We had a party. Send more money. Isn't that what it's all about? Isn't that what we're hearing from the other side? Send more money. And we'll take care of things for you. We don't have to cut anything. We don't have to reduce spending. We're not really on an unsustainable path. Actually, we cut spending over the next 10 years from $47 to $45 billion. Aren't we great? Which is a huge increase over current level of spending. Increases spending every year under the Budget Control Act. Not nearly enough to change the debt course of the country, but that's okay. And by the way, do you know what President Obama's budget does? President Obama's budget wipes out the sequester. That's before the ink is dry on the Budget Control Act agreement at the 11th hour to reduce spending over the next decade, $2 trillion. President Obama submits a budget in February, January, proposing to wipe out the sequester, all $1.1 trillion of it. What kind of commitment do we have to control spending? Just send more money. That's the solution. Tax, spend. Tax, spend. I wish it weren't so. I wish I could say differently. Well, let me ask this question. Do my colleagues not feel a responsibility to tell the American people what their financial plan for the future of America is? Do they have no responsibility? Do they feel no sense of obligation, no duty? And all they want to do is just attack anybody else's plan who's trying to save this republic from financial disaster? Attack them because they might want to reduce spending somewhere and somebody might not like it because they didn't get quite as much from the government as they got before? Are there no programs we're not prepared to reduce or eliminate that are wasteful and aren't worthwhile? Is there nothing in this government? Maybe we got GSA having hot tubs in Las Vegas. Maybe we ought to at least do that. How about the TSA? We've got these warehouses with millions of dollars in equipment not even being used. What about the Solyndra loan, $500 million in bogus loans to political cronies And evidence is coming out there's more of that. Can't cut that. That's against the energy. What they needed to be doing is getting off the backs of the energy producers and allowing more energy to be produced. It doesn't take taxpayers' money to produce more energy. We have decent regulations, let more energy be produced, and you know what they do? They send checks to Uncle Sam. They pay royalties on all the offshore and federal lands. They pay taxes on the money they make. The people who get work at the oil companies pay taxes. That's the way you get money, not just taxing somebody. And I think the American people fundamentally understand that a tax on the rich is a tax on the private sector, and you overtax the private sector, you get less of it. And it's the private sector that creates the wealth, that pays the taxes, that allows us to distribute money here, go back to our districts, and act like we're some hero returning people their money that we took from them, and we want to be some specially credited person because we brought back some bacon through our district. Well, American people understand this, and we're not happy about this. The Budget Control Act's not close to what we need to be doing to put our country on a sound path. Not close. And I have to say the President's budget undoes half of that. It adds, actually, when I said the Budget Control Act took spending down from $47 trillion to $45, President Obama's budget he submitted just a few weeks ago would add $1.6 trillion back, so that would make it go from 45 to 46.6 trillion in spending over 10 years. This is the way they propose to operate this government. That's what their plan is. And why won't they lay it out? Because they know the American people will look at it and say, good grief, that's not what we want for this country. You guys got to get your house in order. We expect you to cut some spending there. We know there's waste, fraud, and abuse in this Capitol. You better get busy. But all we want to hear from my Democratic colleagues is send more money. And what is particularly troubling is a theme and a suggestion that it's okay. We don't have to make any changes, but we do. We do have to make changes. Just show this chart, and the changes will be difficult, but not so bad as to have the country be damaged in any significant way. If we were, this is where our spending level is today, $3.6 trillion right here. This is the next decade under the Budget Control Act, where we cut spending. And that late night confrontation before the government was shut down because we'd reached the spending limit, we couldn't borrow any more money, and an agreement was finally reached to take $2 trillion out of spending over 10 years. That's what this chart is, after that cut had been put in place. Of course, President Obama wants to wipe it out, half of it. And so it would add $8 trillion in new spending. You cut that to 6 or 5, we'd balance the budget. It'd still show an increase, wouldn't it? It would just be maybe a $5 or $4 trillion increase in spending instead of 8. And we could make a big difference there. But the path we're on is unsustainable. The path we're on leaves us in the danger zone. The path we're on is already led us to have more debt than Europe, more debt than per capita than any of the countries in Europe, and it's unsustainable. I'm really worried about it. I'm particularly worried that we don't have a sense in this body that we've got to make changes. Madam President, we're going to have to look at the entitlement programs. I've heard Senator Conrad say this repeatedly. He served on the Debt Commission. They said we've got to do that. Does the President propose any entitlement changes in his budget? No. Does the Democratic members of Congress here in the Senate, are they proposing entitlement changes? No. Who is? Senator Ryan has proposed entitlement changes. He's prepared to defend them as being the kind of changes that will preserve, protect, and sustain Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. But you can't allow it to continue to increase at rates 4 or 5 times inflation rate. That's what an unsustainable spending course is. When your 60% of your budget is increasing at 3 or 4 times inflation rate, you are in big trouble. You can't tax your way out of that. That's just a fact. Upper income people are going to have to contribute more to Medicare. They just are. We don't have the money. We can't just make it up and act like that's not reality. It is reality. So I think the budget you'll see from this side will be attacked viciously as wanting to kill these kind of programs. They're not designed to kill these kind of programs. They're designed to put us on a financial path that we can be healthy and prosperous in and sustain the benefits that we've promised. But a big chunk of Medicare is paid for out of the general treasury of the United States. People with higher incomes ought to contribute some to that. And they can do that. We can do that as a nation. So, Madam President, I think it's just rather weird, odd, and curious that we come to the floor and call up without debate, without an opportunity to amend, a series of budgets. Why? Because no budget has been produced in the Budget Committee. And under the rules of the Senate, people can bring up a budget. You don't get to have amendments, but you can bring up. Under the Budget Act, the Budget Committee should have hearings, offer amendments, have a markup, bring the budget to the floor, guaranteed 50 hours of debate, unlimited amendments, and then final passage within a certain time. That's the way it works. Guarantees priority to a budget because the people who wrote the Budget Act in 1974 knew how important a budget was. They gave it priority, can't be filibustered, 50 votes with the Vice President, 51 votes otherwise can pass the budget because we need a budget, and we should be seeking to do that. And that's, to me, it's pretty frustrating to see the situation we're in. So I guess I'll conclude with asking, does the majority party, do they not feel an obligation to tell the American people where they would like to lead the country? And do they not, in a time of financial crisis, not want to lay out a plan that they can rally behind and ask the American people to rally behind to save our country? Isn't it an absolute fact that this country has never, ever been in a financial condition as severe as this one? We have never, ever faced the long-term systemic debt threat that we face today. We've never been on a path so unsustainable. Never. Nothing close to it. This is a threat to the future of America, and the party that aspires to lead the United States Senate should lay out its plan. The President should be engaged. He should be insisting we pass a budget that has some meaning and would change the debt course of the country. And what do we have? Nothing but a tax on members of Congress who lay out plans that would actually do that. But not bring ours up. Why? It's foolish. It'd be foolish for us. We'd expose ourselves. Somebody would show what we propose. They might add up how many taxes we actually want to increase. They might add up and say, your plan doesn't change the debt course. They may add up and say, you spend too much. So we don't want to do that. That would be foolish. And I've never seen a situation in which, in a time of crisis, this nation has had a failure of leadership as great as we're seeing today, it seems to me. Now, maybe I don't get this. Maybe something's wrong with me. But I think everybody that cares about the Republic should be prepared to stand and vote on proposals to put us on the right path We're not on the right path today. We've got a threat out there that could put us in a financial crisis overnight. It could happen very quickly, and when that occurs, it's too late to fix it. We saw the warnings that led to the 2007 debt crisis. That was a deeply damaging event, that debt crisis. We haven't gotten over it yet, and we could have another one. Wouldn't that be terrible? These numbers don't assume that we have a recession. They have no real recession projected in the numbers that you're seeing. We need to avoid a debt crisis, a financial crisis, as Erskine Bowles and Alan Simpson on the Debt Commission told us to avoid. We need to do that, and we're going to have some leadership on both sides of the aisle, I believe. So, Madam President, I don't know, reserve the balance of my time and would yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from North Dakota.
Madam President, Senator Menendez is here, and he's to be recognized for 10 minutes. As Senator Menendez would do that at this point.
Madam President.
Senator from New Jersey.
Last year, the Budget Control Act became the law of the land, and it sets discretionary spending limits for security and non-security spending for not just 1 year, but for 2 years. And it puts us on a path to reduce the deficit by more than $2 trillion over the next 10 years. So now we hear from our friends on the other side of the aisle who continue to try to make claims that we don't have a budget. I guess if you say it often enough, people may believe it. But it seems that our Republican colleagues have selective amnesia about the Budget Control Act. We have a budget. It's called the Budget Control Act, and it has the force of law, which is more than we can say for any of the proposals before us today. So today's debate makes me wonder if we're on a dance floor instead of the Senate floor, because we've already taken one step forward and now it's 2 steps back. These Republican proposals call for extreme cuts on the backs of senior students and the most vulnerable in our society without asking any contributions from millionaires and corporations. And that's just not fair, it is not balanced, and it doesn't reflect the priorities of New Jersey's middle-class families. Now, I strongly believe that we must get our nation's fiscal house in order, and I have always supported a fair and balanced approach to reducing our deficits. But I cannot in good conscience support proposals in which working families, seniors, and students must endure billions in cuts, while all companies making $1 trillion in profit over the next decade and billionaires are not asked to pay their fair share. Now, supporters of the House Republican budget introduced by Congressman Ryan justify their radical changes to Medicare and other programs by saying we simply can't afford it. But in the very same Republican budget in which we can't afford that, we see an average tax cut of over $250,000 to millionaires. And that's on top of the 6-figure tax break they're already currently receiving from the Bush tax cuts. And at the same time that Republicans propose to add thousands of dollars of increased costs on the backs of middle-class seniors, they somehow find the money for another tax cut for millionaires that's worth more than 4 times the entire average household income of an American family. Now, people who have worked hard and built personal wealth should be applauded for their success. At the same time, many of them are willing to contribute to help the nation in this tough economic time if we ask, and we know from experience that asking a fair share from the wealthiest and most successful, as we did during the Clinton era of prosperity, will not break our economy. It just comes down to a matter of fairness. What we're seeing today is our friends on the other side of the aisle taking yet another run at shifting our nation's financial burden onto middle-class families, seniors, and students, all while defending special breaks for their special interests. How is that fair? How is that balanced? It's not, and we can't let it stand. Let's talk about the facts. Republicans are not only seeking to repeal the Affordable Care Act, but they're also dismantling Medicare, Medicaid, and other vital programs. Under the Ryan budget, New Jersey's health care system would be devastated. The Republican plan would cut $39 billion in health benefits from New Jerseyans over the next decade, leaving families unable to find care and doctors unable to provide it. Their plan will throw upwards of 465,000 low-income families and seniors off Medicaid, kick more than 70,000 young adults off their parents' health insurance, and leave more than 3 million New Jerseyans, including 877,000 children, worrying about whether they'll hit their lifetime benefit limit and lost coverage as a result. For seniors, the Republican plan ends Medicare as we know it, leaving retirees to worry about whether the system they paid into their entire working lives will really be there for them when they need it. Their plan would force seniors out of the Medicare they know and instead provide an inadequate voucher that they claim will cover the premiums for private insurance. That claim, however, is false, leaving seniors with an increase in out-of-pocket expenses of over $6,000 a year. It also means immediately higher costs for the more than 126,000 seniors in New Jersey who have saved a combined $95 million on prescription drugs, because every one of these Republican budgets will reopen the gap in prescription drug coverage that we call the donut hole. The Republican budget also means that 1 million seniors in New Jersey who have already accessed no-cost preventative health services, such as cancer screenings, would now be forced to pay for those screenings out of pocket. And it means that 270,000 seniors and disabled individuals in my home state who rely on Medicaid for services such as long-term care will be kicked out of the system. The most shocking thing about all of this is that the radical Ryan budget seems to be the least extreme of the Republican budgets. For example, Senator Paul's proposal calls for Medicare to end abruptly on January 1st, 2014, while simultaneously decreasing Social Security benefits and raising the eligibility age to 70. And Senator Toomey's plan would force seniors off Medicare and only provide a modest voucher to purchase moderate coverage, private coverage, I should say. It would slash Medicaid by nearly $1 trillion, $180 billion more than even the Ryan budget calls for, and shift a massive and untenable burden on the states while leaving millions of families without coverage. How is that fair and balanced? It's not, and we should reject these proposals. Here's another fact about the Ryan House budget. Instead of making college more affordable, more accessible, more achievable, the Ryan budget will do the exact opposite. It will create additional obstacles for students that could, according to the study by the Education Trust, ultimately take Pell Grants away from 1 million students. And for those who aren't kicked out of the system entirely, it will freeze the maximum Pell Grant award despite tuition raising far above the rate of inflation. And to add insult to injury, the Ryan budget would allow the interest rate on subsidized Stafford loans to double, a debate that is all too familiar to this body. Now, my Republican colleagues claim to support lower rates, then filibustered them, and now they're proposing a budget that would allow the interest rates to double. So for more than 60% of students who receive Pell Grants while also taking out loans, the Ryan budget is a double whammy. Not only will they lose some or all of their Pell Grants, but they'll be forced to pay double the interest on their loans, which will only increase with a reduction in Pell Grants. Today, receiving some form of higher education is almost a prerequisite for a 21st century career. In fact, young adults with only a high school diploma are almost 3 times as likely to be unemployed and earn just over half as much as those with a bachelor's degree. But even as the demand for college graduates in the workforce increases, so have the costs of tuition, making higher education all the more critical, as well as for the nation to be the global leader competitively. Yet more out of reach for millions of students if we follow these plans. How is that fair? How is that balanced? It's not, and it just shows the misguided priorities that are behind these proposals. Middle-class families can't afford it, seniors can't afford it, students can't afford it, and that's why we can't afford to let it happen. Madam President, I yield back the balance of my time and yield the floor.
Madam President, we're waiting Senator Paul. think I'll just take a quick minute here, Madam President, just to respond to my friend, the ranking member of the committee. And I've got a lot of respect for the ranking member. Truth is, on the larger issue, we're not all that far apart. On the larger issue is, as a nation, we're on an unsustainable course. It's as clear as it can be. And we've got to deal with it. We have a difference with respect to what we've got right now. I believe we do have a budget in place for this year and next year. The place where I would agree with the gentleman is we don't have the longer-term plan. The problem is, are we really going to get all sides to get off their fixed positions right before a national election? And that's a matter of judgment. I don't believe that it's going to happen. I was part of the Simpson-Bowles Commission. In fact, Senator Gregg and I are the ones that got a commission appointed. And he and I were 2 of the 11 votes in favor of the long-term plan that Bowles-Simpson put before the American people. 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, 1 independent. And that would have reduced the debt from what it would otherwise be by more than $4 trillion. Depending on what baseline you use, even more than that. And that's the minimum we need to do. I actually tried to convince the Commission to do $5.6 trillion. That was my proposal to the Commission. A $5.6 trillion package of deficit reduction and debt reduction. Why did I pick that? Because we could balance the budget in 10 years if we did. But I do want to go back to this question about whether we've got a budget right now for this year. And I really say, with respect, I believe it's very clear we do. The Budget Control Act, not a budget resolution, but a law, said very clearly that the allocations, aggregates, and levels of spending shall apply in the Senate in the same manner as for a concurrent resolution on the budget for fiscal year 2012. That identical language follows for 2013. Let's put up the next, and so, pursuant to the Budget Control Act, in April, I provided to the appropriators and the authorizers these budget allocations for appropriations. For Security Discretionary Budget Authority for 2013, $546 billion. For Non-Security Discretionary Budget Authority, $501 billion. That's a total of, on budget, of $1,040,954. Mandatory spending, $815,671 billion, for a total of $1,862,671 million. Then to the authorizing committees. I went through some of these numbers previously. The Agriculture, Nutrition, Forestry, $13,397 million. On entitlements for that same committee, $124,580 million. On armed services, $146,698 million. On banking, housing, and urban affairs, $22,167 million. Again, I could go through every committee, but there it is. I mean, the appropriations spending limits have been provided to the appropriators. The authorizing committees have been given their designations. So for this year, we have spending limits. Now, I see Senator Paul is here, and it's his time, so I thank the senator for his courtesy. I would just say, for this year and next, it's clear we have spending limits put in place. What we don't have is the longer-term plan. That's where I would agree with the gentleman. And the question is there any prospect of the two sides coming together, getting off their fixed positions right now? I doubt that very much. Senator Paul is here. And he was had this time 10 minutes at this juncture. Senator Paul.
Madam President,
Senator from Kentucky.
we're currently borrowing